light my sage real quick. Get this party started today. Welcome to Toria's Jack 2.0. I'm just lighting some sage. There goes my cousin, Caven. Welcome. I'm lighting some sage. To cleanse his energy today. We're going to start in a few minutes. Yo, what up, cuz? What's poppin'? Put some Florida water on. Hey, Cindy, I see you. Okay, so good evening. This is our 9th episode of the Unpacking White Supremacy in the Mental Health Field. Cindy, can you request to join the live, and then I'm gonna tap you in as soon as I'm done with the little introduction. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So this is Unpacking White Supremacy in the Mental Health Field. This is our 9th episode. It's like season 1. It's like the completion of season 1 today. And the intention of this conversation is to bring awareness to how white supremacy impacts and taints the mental health field. Not only how it sort of impacts us as mental health professionals and clinicians, but also how it impacts the clients and consumers and the people that access services in our mental health field. And so it's important to have this conversation to bring awareness to the challenges that come up when we think about white supremacy and sort of looking at ways that we can figure out how could I put this? Because it almost feels like white supremacy in the mental health field ain't going anywhere because we live in the United States of America and we live in a context of white supremacy. So I'm not even sure if the intention is to just bring awareness to, I'm thinking about this right now, right? So initially the intention was to bring awareness to this sort of challenge, this ethical dilemma is what I call it, so that maybe we can do something about it as mental health professionals and clinicians. However, the more I sort of delve into this conversation with my colleagues, the more I send out emails and have conversations with various types of people, there is this resistance to this type of conversation and this sort of denial of how white supremacy impacts the mental health field. And so, and when I think about like these particular lives, like half my lives already been deleted. So I'm sure this live will also be deleted eventually. And so that speaks to what's going on in the world, right? To a larger issue around conversations that pertain to white supremacy. And so I'm not sure if having these conversations and bringing awareness to it is necessarily going to change the mental health field so that it can be sort of more equitable and inclusive. And even I don't even like that language either because it's a response to white supremacy. But I think that maybe we have to sort of create our own systems and our own sort of that match our values as Black and brown folk in particular. And so it's a challenging conversation because a lot comes up inside of just even putting a live together and the feedback that I get and so on and so forth. So anyway, so the goal is to bring attention and awareness to white supremacy and how it impacts the mental health field. As I already said, it's an extension of the Freedom Fighters of the Mind initiative, which is an initiative for Black and brown therapists where we come together and have conversations about some of the challenges we're dealing with in the mental health field, primarily white supremacy. And so this is just an extension of that. And my name is Antonio Morales. I'm the founder of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC. And it's a private practice that's dedicated really to dealing with addressing and challenging the adverse impact of white supremacy. Hey, sister, I see that you're there. Hey, sister. I think that's my sister. There's nobody else named Dimple. And shout out to Twin Tenacity 5. Okay. And so the goal of my private practice is to really address and challenge white supremacy and the adverse impact that it has on black and brown folk. Without further ado, let me get into this conversation today. My guest is Cindy Bautista-Thomas, who is a PhD, LCSW, and RYT. I don't know what the RYT stands for, but this is my guest today. And the reason how Cindy got here is because I went to a Latinx and social work book sort of events with NYU. It was virtual, and I saw Cindy. She was one of the panelists, and she's also one of the authors of the Latinx and social work book. Shout out to the Latinx and social work book. And when I heard Cindy talking, I just felt the spirit, right? Like I felt the spirit. The way Cindy was talking really moved me. And I said, man, who is that woman? So I reached out to her like, yo, like I got this like live situation happening, unpacking white supremacy. And I think maybe you would add some real value to the conversation. That's based on what I saw during that sort of NYU virtual event. So shout out to you, Cindy. So that's how Cindy got here today. It's our first time interacting. We've interacted through email and stuff, but this is our first time interacting. And I'm going to now let you in. Registered yoga teacher. Oh, okay. I knew that. I knew that's what that was. All right, let me get you in here. Oh, by the way, all of these lives, even though they've been deleted from Instagram, thank you, Karen, Karens and Kens, they're all already uploaded onto YouTube, but tomorrow I'll sort of send out the links and stuff for that information, with that information. Okay. Cindy. Hey.
Hello, hello, hello. Let me adjust my camera here.
How are you?
I never know what it's going to do when I adjust the camera. Espérate un momento. My apologies. Good evening. So wonderful to be here with you and all of you that are joining this evening.
I feel like I've been waiting for a long time to have this conversation with you. I feel like the Latinx and social work NYU thing was like 3 months ago, I think, or like a minute ago.
Yeah, it was in October.
No, you're talking about the book release.
Yes, in October.
No, I'm talking about the panel after that. There was a panel.
Okay. Yes, you're right. That was. I'm not sure. I think it was in March. I'm not sure.
Something like that, but I was like explaining to the viewers and the viewers that are coming in later, who's gonna see the replay, about your vibe, like what I saw when you were speaking and how I felt the spirit. But I really did feel the spirit though. Like something about what you were saying. You said something about the ancestors or like frames of your family members or something, and I was like, yo, like that's what we need, right? Like to sort of have that representation where we can fully be ourselves, fully be self-expressed in our own values and our truth and our customs and cultures, right? A lot of what we're taught, especially in the mental health field and social work and other sort of areas, psychology and psychiatry and so on and so forth, is to erase who we are to sort of, I guess, be digestible for like the white client, right? So, I mean, that's my opinion. That's what I'm thinking. And so, can you just come up a little bit more?
Oh, yeah.
I just want to make sure that I can hear you.
Okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
I wanted to make sure my head wasn't cut off.
No, yeah, your head is fine. No, because what happened was one time one of my other guests was far away, so I could barely see it, and I didn't realize that it would be a visual thing later on. And so, welcome. Thank you for being here. I really am excited about this conversation with you today. And how's everything going today? How's everything? How's your day been?
It's fantastic. I'm so excited to be here. You know, believe it or not, in the same way that you experienced me in that panel, I experienced you in the chat. And I was like, who is this Antonio lighting up this chat box right now? So I was feeling the same vibe.
No, it's like, you know, it's almost like, you know, it's like that, how we like attracts like, right? That sort of vibe. Because it feels very like, I mean, I'm from Brooklyn, but it feels like my family, right? I don't know if you're from Brooklyn or the Bronx or where.
No, listen, BX all the way. BX all the way. My husband, though, he represents Brooklyn, so I'm a Brooklyn by marriage.
Okay, okay. And so, you know, Brooklyn and Bronx people, we have like similar vibes, right? You know, not too much Queens and Manhattan, no shade, but it is what it is. Staten Island, well, that don't count. But you know what I'm saying? No, it slightly counts. Staten Island is like New Jersey, which is where I live now. But I think it's that Brooklyn and Bronx vibe. They're very similar.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, okay, before I have you introduce yourself, I want to do an icebreaker, which is what I tell all my guests, right? And so the icebreaker basically is for you to tell us where your people come from, your ancestors, your elders, and to let us know sort of a positive characteristic or attribute that you inherited from them, and how that shows up today in your life.
So, yo soy hija de Baudilio Bautista García.
Ave María.
Hija de Isabel Mendoza Bautista. We come from Afro descendants of La República Dominicana, Quisqueya for some. And I embrace all of who I am in terms of my Afrocentricity as a Latina, as a bilingual Spanish-speaking first-generation Dominican-American. All my BIPOC peoples, I fully embrace my spiritual brothers and sisters, those who honor the ancestors that come from way, way, way back, right? Yeah. And so those are all of my people. Like my peoples are right here, representing, right? And the characteristic that I got, I would say, from both my mother and father, because they're both ancestors today, is joy. Is joy. My mother was the eldest daughter of 13 siblings. They lived on a farm. Very strict father, strict mother. She had to do, you know, the traditional gender roles that were in place at the time. And still, she found time to have and experience joy. The same is true for when she came to the United States with 2 children in tow, with a husband who was a cab driver 6 days a week. She was a homemaker. And we had joy to the umpteenth power in my household. Right? We were the household where kids came over. They had the arroz con pollo, habichuela, plátanos, salad, you name it, we had it. And I didn't even realize that I was living in poverty until I had to like fill out financial aid applications for college. So how about that? Because that was the joy that we experienced, transcended the poverty, transcended the crack era, transcended the gang stuff that was going on, the teenage pregnancy, the project vibe, the pissing the elevators, etc., etc.
Yo, you know what's so funny? Because I feel like, I don't know why I was not present to this until you just said it, right? That reflects my family, right? Like, my family, especially my mother's side of the family, right? We really understand that joy, right? No matter what you just described is sort of where I come from as well. And so, but that joy was still there. And, you know, I think I took it for granted until right now you got me present to it, right? Because I love hanging out with my family, no matter what the circumstance is, even when we're going to, like, you know, a funeral, right? Or somebody's wake. Somehow in the midst of that, there's an opportunity for us to have a joyful experience.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I Oh my goodness. You just like, you brought it like back, right? Something that I forget. You know, I mean, I know it, but I don't say it, right? I know it, but I don't give it language like you just did. And that was powerful. That was so powerful that you just shared that in the way you did. See what I'm talking about? This is what you do, right?
Thank
you take
you.
me to church. Like you move my spirit. Like I want to cry.
I love that.
That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that about your family. And I feel like for the people who's listening, right, they might even get present to the joy in their family as well, right? Because I feel especially for Black and brown people, I know for sure that whenever I'm in Black and brown spaces, there is a joy in those spaces, right? That is just like, there's no explanation for it. And when I've been in other spaces that were not Black and brown, it felt like it sort of took the joy away in some ways, right? So I'm really like, I'm like stuck. You got me stuck with that joy part. Okay, let me compose myself. All right, see. So,
by the way, I can't see if there's anything going on in the chat box. For some reason, my screen is frozen to that.
Wait a minute. What does that mean that your screen is frozen?
No, I can see you, but just in case if people were saying something, I can't see anything in the chat box. I don't know if there's anything going on. Oh,
there's like waves and people joining, and somebody said triple 3210 said, "Tell it, Cindy."
Oh, that's Omar. I love Omar.
My son, I think I need glasses. I'm just afraid to go to the doctor to get, because they're gonna be like, "Oh, you have cataracts or whatever." You know,
listen,
you know how we do. You know how men be. So, now that we got you to sort of get us all present to joy, can you formally introduce yourself and tell us what your position is and what you're currently doing in that position, and how long you've been in the mental health field, and what inspired you to get into the mental health field?
So I'll start with this. So my name is Doctora Cindy Bautista-Thomas. And I'll start with what inspired me to get in the field. And then I'll go into the various roles that I play, because I don't have just one position. So what inspired me to do this work is actually connected with OOO. So Omar Ortiz was a youth development community organizer back in the days in the Highbridge section of the Boogie Down Bronx. And he persuaded, cajoled, influenced a whole bunch of amazing teenagers, vibrant, lively, joyous, mischievous teenagers, to get involved in a community organizing project that Cornell Cooperative Extension sponsored. And so that was the beginning of me learning how to move in the world as a young person, but also like how my voice mattered in a space where it seemed like it didn't really matter, right?
Yes.
So that was sort of the beginning of turning that knob of like, hey, I have skills in this area. I want to help people. I want to work with young people, and I want to make this world a better place. So that was the beginning of that. And then of course my mom, I always feel, was like the first social worker I ever met. She was not a traditional social worker, but she was a cultural capital warrior.
What did that mean?
So so people talk about, so of course I'm an academic, so I'm going to bring a little academic vibe to the Boogie Down swag. So cultural capital, you know, this amazing scholar Yoso talks about how our communities of color have cultural capital wealth that sometimes we don't acknowledge because of the deficit white supremacist mindsets that have been instilled in our communities and in our repertoire, right?
Yes.
And so when you think about people like my mother, who had a third grade education, she didn't know English too well. She was able to get all of her children scholarships to a Catholic elementary school in the neighborhood. She was able to find out about after-school programming, summer camp. She made sure our butts were very engaged so that we didn't sort of succumb to the neighborhood, you know, whatever that was going on, right? And so I would see her doing her thing. She also was this entrepreneur that sold colchas, blankets, sheets, towels. And she sold them from my brother's bedroom.
Nice.
Because she needed to make ends meet. Because my father, as a cab driver, it just wasn't making the cut. And we were living on public assistance, government assistance, right? Because she was caring for all of her children. So she was definitely someone that inspired me. So I have to definitely give her props. May she rest in peace.
Big up to Mom.
Last week that she passed away. And so one of the roles that I play is that I'm a mom of 2 teenagers. One's second-year sophomore student, and another in college, and a sophomore boy in high school. I'm a wife of an amazing husband. I have to give him props because he supports all my shenanigans. Winston James Thomas Jr.
Beautiful.
In the Zone Catering chef. And then I'm a doctoral lecturer. I teach undergraduates and graduate students at the College of Staten Island Department of Social Work.
Oh, whoops.
I love to teach.
Sorry about Staten Island. Sorry.
I know. I met wonderful students in Staten Island. Believe me, I had not been in Staten Island, I think, one time before I got the job. I'm also a co-founder of Velocity Visions, Inc., which is a personal and professional development company that me and my colleague founded in 2017. So we provide workshops, retreats, all kinds of facilitation. I'm a mindfulness facilitator, yoga teacher, trainer. So we bring in to corporate, nonprofit, governmental entities, groups, and communities this idea of connecting with your healing. So that you could tap into your transformation.
That's right.
Get into that personal impact. So that then you could have that global impact.
Yes.
So I do that. And then I'm also an author. I recently co-wrote Latinx and Social Work, but I'm also working on a young adult novel.
Nice.
I'm also working on a chapter of a textbook in Latinx, working with youth. And I'm also co-author of a school social work textbook. I'm also a clinical supervisor in a mental health clinic. So those are the roles that I play for right now.
Yo, and you know what? You are also an MC. You an MC. You an MC. You need to like host an award show or something. Cause you see what you just did, right? Like you, like seriously. Can I like MC? Can you be the MC? Can you like take that on?
What's funny is that people, I MC. That's so funny that you said that. When people have asked me to do that, but sort of informally, because I love engaging people and I love connecting with people to help them tap into that livelihood.
That's right.
And that's the joy that we talked about earlier, because I love seeing people connecting with joy. So I do that sort of in everything that I do. I do that.
I absolutely love it. Like love it. You're a light. I mean, that's the way I can describe you. You're really a light. I can't imagine, but the perspective of you sort of stepping into spaces and bringing life and light. You feel me? I mean, that's what you got. I mean, that's your thing. There's something about that is so invigorating, because a lot of, I don't know if you like, you ever been in a meeting before and they were like, so let's like one word check in, how you're feeling today, and every person is tired, right? Like, I'm like, what is going on with these people? Like, why is everybody always tired, right? And so I can never see you in a meeting saying, I'm tired today. I just can't. Like, we don't got time for that. You know, it's funny because I used to work in a high school and we would do a class, like, I think it was like 7:30 in the morning, and it has so much energy. And the students were like, Antonio, it's too early for that. I was like, early? What do you mean it's early? Like, come on, like, let's wake up. Let's be alive. You know, I think for me, you know, I'm sort of vibing with you, but I think for me, what's so important about that kind of energy that you bring into the conversation is that for me, so many of my family members passed away early, right? And so to be alive is a gift and a blessing that not all of us have access to anymore because we died earlier, right? And so it really sort of, the way you sort of express yourself feels celebratory to being alive. And that is a beautiful thing.
Oh,
that is a beautiful thing.
That.
Yeah. That. Beautiful thing. Okay. So, so now we know that the conversation we're having is about unpacking white supremacy in the mental health field. So in your own words, how would you describe white supremacy?
How much time do we have? No. So I'm gonna give it real quick, in terms of my perspective of it, is white supremacy is the historical breaking down of people's heritage, traditions, practices, language, spiritual development, right? The breaking down. And it's systematic, it's intentional, and it's very toxic. I'm gonna just leave it right there because we only have a little bit.
But it's funny because I talk about white supremacy as a toxic ideology, right? And I love that you said intentional, right? Because oftentimes when we have conversations, especially in mixed spaces, well, it's unintentional. I didn't know. Like everybody's fucking oblivious, right? So what's going? You know what I'm saying? Like you have no clue what you're actually doing on purpose. Like that is not intentional, right? And so for you to say intentional is really the language we need to sort of bring in this conversation, because there's a lot of people pretending that they're not being intentional when we know that they're being intentional. It's like, you've ever been like an asshole to some people sometimes? I mean, I know I have. That's intentional. That's not by accident. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, when you use the word intentional, I think we need to keep that inside of the language of white supremacy and stop pretending that y'all don't know what y'all doing.
Absolutely.
Enough is enough.
Absolutely.
Right? So with that definition, can you talk about what you witnessed in the mental health field? Like, give us 3 examples, like brief examples of what you've seen so far that sort of speak to or have expressed white supremacy?
Absolutely. So the very first thing, because I'm in social work education, I have to talk about even how we train our practitioners, right? Some schools of social work, I'm going to talk about social work in particular because that's the framework and the lens that I know more of because of my field, right? There are some schools of social work that don't even support their students in learning about what it means to be an intentional disruptor of white supremacy ideologies, practices, policies, procedures that have been historically implemented in institutions and that then perpetuated onto vulnerable communities, the very communities that we wouldn't have jobs if those communities didn't exist. Let's be real. Right?
That's right. Yes.
And so let's start with the social work schools, right? And that's why after I got my doctorate, I felt like the ancestors was like, all right, boo, we ready for you to do your thing. Because I left a career in administration that I had for 12 years and took a pay cut to do social work education, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I've seen is overdiagnosis and over-medication for communities of color, right? Where we don't even take the time to truly understand the traumatic impact, right? The symptoms that our communities are experiencing as a result of oftentimes the systematic, right, policies, procedures, and practices that are in place. So that we see, when I worked as a school social worker for 8 years, so many children that were diagnosed with diagnosis like ADHD when it was really depression, because they had families that were incarcerated, families that were deported, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and no one really took the time to inquire, right? Why? Because there wasn't an interpreter at these screenings and intakes. How irresponsible is that?
Yes.
That's 2 and 3 together, because I have a number 3. I have a number 4 that I have to say.
Give me another one.
The other one is, you know, the discounting and the not honoring of spiritual healers, practitioners, and practices, healing practices that our communities have embraced for thousands and thousands of years. How could we as a mental health system at this point in 2022 discount practices like Reiki, like Santeria, like, you know, healing circles, right? I think that there's some communities and practitioners that the knowledge is increasing in many ways, but I feel like there are still mental health organizations that don't even ask the question to clients about their participation in practices, healing practices, such as prayer groups, meditation circles, right? Seances, misas, right? And so there are so many ways that we as communities have been healing each other, right? And now it's getting popular in other circles, right? Now people are monetizing on our, I mean, I couldn't even believe I saw sage on Amazon, okay? Let's talk about that. But anyway, let's not talk about that. So I'm going to stop there, right?
Wait, but I bought my sage from Amazon because I can't find botanicas anymore.
Who?
I can't find botanicas.
Well, you're not looking in the right places, boo.
Listen, Brooklyn got gentrified as crazy, and Mad Botanica shut down.
I heard, yes.
Mad Botanicas. Right.
You're right.
So I have to go to Amazon to get this.
Well, there are other practitioners that sell that kind of stuff. So check me afterwards, and I will let you know. There is Protect Your Energy, LLC. La Santera, NYC. De Pojo Ojos. So there are a lot of women of color, spiritual practitioners that are selling authentic spiritual paraphernalia, materials, and tools. And they are tools that we can use in addition to, not in lieu of, mental health professionals, right? Because sometimes we also need the therapist, right?
Yes.
In connection. But let's work in collaboration.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, because it's a holistic approach, right? Like, and how we sort of, and we have to keep that in mind, especially coming from the people we come from, right? We must incorporate that into our healing, because not only does that honor who we are, but it also makes a huge difference. Because even for me, I noticed that, you know, when I'm having challenges, I light a candle, you know, like I'll go to the cemetery and hang out with a abuela who's like right down the block, and like, and so on and so forth. And these are things that are really, really important to my overall well-being, right? And a lot of times, you know, when you go into seek services, that's not sort of ever talked about, like exactly what you just said. And it's so important, though, to the person's overall well-being, right? That sort of component, because it's not just the spirituality part, it's also the custom and the culture, right? It's the honoring of our ancestors and the indigenous people we come from. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Man, I don't even want to even ask any questions. I just want to hear you talk. Like, I don't, I can't take you. Like, I'm telling you, like, shout out to Atlas Rum. Atlas, I like this guy, Atlas Rum. Cool dude. He's very engaging in these conversations.
No, I don't know why I'm not seeing anything. So I'm just going to put a fire and see if that reinvigorates my chat box.
There goes the fire. Oh. Did it reinvigorate?
No, I don't see anything else after that. So that's okay.
Okay. So, you know, I wanted to briefly go back to the first point you made around how social work practitioners are not trained in a specific way, and then they go out to the community and they sort of perpetuate this sort of harm. Because I feel like I've been really questioning my own self and my history as a social worker. And I know, based on sort of having to maintain the status quo in the system, that I've harmed my people, even when I felt like it was against my own values. Right. And I've been struggling a lot lately, specifically around this conversation about what it means to be a social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, and whether for somebody like me, whether that holds any value. Because, you know, the more sort of understanding I have around sort of the context of white supremacy and how it has infiltrated every part of my work, I don't want to be part of this. So I feel very, like my integrity is out. You know, it's like, sort of condoning a system that continues to harm my community. And it really feels like a lack of integrity for me. And it's a real challenge because this is my purpose, right? And even though I was supposed to be like born in like Africa or Puerto Rico, like in a village, and I was supposed to be like a medicine man or a shaman, this is what I got. This is the context I exist inside of. And so I just, if you could just, and I know that the next question is to sort of expand on one thing, but because I don't know if you're going to expand on this one. So I just want to make sure that I touch on this, the first point you made, because I thought that was so important, especially for students and young people who are like new in the field, to sort of get that perspective. You feel me?
I appreciate the question because I too have struggled, right? I was working for a predominantly white Ivy League institution for 12 years as a field educator, right? Where I came in initially having been a school social worker for 8 years, working with my folks in the Tremont section of the Bronx, advocating, collaborating, training, supporting, clinical work with my elementary school students, connecting, vibing, but spirit called me to something else, right? And that's another conversation, being obedient to that voice about what's your purpose and your next step, right? Because we get comfortable. And what I would say for our, social work students and early career practitioners, one of the things that I love about the work that I do with Velocity Visions and why Ancy and I started Velocity Visions is because once upon a time, we were both divorcees, single moms that were sort of finding our way in the world, right? And what we realized is that when we tap into our authentic selves and tapped into our gifts, talents, and abilities without regard for what the world had to say. We both come from immigrant communities. She's Indian, I'm Dominican. And to be divorced was like, oh my gosh, you're never going to find anybody. You're never going to, right? So there's like the life stuff that you deal with as early career social workers. There's the traditional stuff that you wear, the belief systems that your ancestors also bring to the table that don't always align with the social work values. And let's be clear, social work started with white women, Protestant women who were alarmed about how immigrant populations were moving in the world. And they felt like they needed to tell people how to act. That's how social work started.
Like policing?
That's how social work started, right?
Like the early day Karens?
Yes. So we have to first, let's acknowledge our past.
What?
Let's heal from our past. And I talk about it in my classes, and I'll have students cracking up because the same way I'm talking to you about it, that's how I talk to my students.
But no one ever taught us this in my college,
right?
my graduate program or undergraduate
program.
What?
Maybe you were taking a nap.
No, I wasn't. They never said nothing about this.
No, but the truth is not everyone educates it in this way, right?
Right. This is important, yes.
Of course, they talk about the superheroes in social work.
Right,
Jane Addams.
Yes.
The Whole House and all of that, right? And all of that is wonderful because it set the foundation for a lot of the things that we have today. But also, let's acknowledge the harm. Let's acknowledge the Indian boarding schools, where social workers were very much a part of that co-opting situation. Let's acknowledge the visiting teachers, which were the first school social workers that used to tell the immigrant families, like, this the way you're supposed to act in the schools, right? So first of all, I think what we got to do is acknowledge the harm.
That's
right.
Yes.
Let's heal from that. Let's make peace with that. That's why there's all these sort of anti-racist, anti-oppressive social work groups that are really starting to get back into this, like, oh, snap. I'm in this field that started kind of jacked up, but I'm here for a purpose. And we could sort of co-opt social work, which is what many of us are doing now. And we're making it our own, right? And we're learning how to make peace with who we are, being authentic with who we are, right? And that's why you started the Liberated Self. I was so excited when I saw your website, when I got your email. I was very humbled, and thank you so much for having me on here, because this is the work, right? Doing things that may not be the traditional, may not be the popular things within social work practice, you know, and which it ties into probably the next question, which is like, how do you deal with the white supremacist stuff?
No, the next question was, can you expand on one? But we're already expanding on one.
No, so we expand on, right? Okay. So that's what I would say, right? That you get to feel all the feelings in the same way that you would tell a client that has experienced trauma. You know, if you're not feeling all the feelings and connecting to that harm, you're not going to be able to connect with the joy.
That's right. No,
right?
It's true.
Or welcome that in. So we get to release that stuff que no sirve, right? That doesn't serve us. So that we can bring in the good stuff. And that's what I see happening with this new generation of social workers. I must say that it's been such a breath of fresh air to work within the CUNY system, to work with, you know, communities of color that are ready to do that damn thing in social work, and also the allies, right? The folks that are ready to also sort of acknowledge the roles that have been played by their ancestors, right? We get to acknowledge the roles our ancestors have played in our lives, right? And then we also get to connect with ourselves, because that's really the key. Sometimes we sort of lose ourselves in the work because we get caught up in the serving, right? And the serving is important, but you get to be even the most optimal servant in this field when you're able to connect with you, right? And that's the work really that I feel like I'm called to do. And that's the work that I do with Velocity Visions. But I also get to do that in the classroom.
Yes, yes. So let me ask, because I'm so curious in how you just answered that. And it was sort of like steering away from the way I sort of created the prompts. But for you, you know, on a personal level, when you sort of stepped into the field, I'm sure you have years of experience now, but have you ever felt, and this is speaking to the people, this is for the people who might feel sometimes discouraged, disheartened, feel, you know, demoralized and so on and so forth. Have you ever had that experience within the social work field? And how are you able to sort of maneuver through that and sort of move forward anyway? And still stand in your purpose. Yeah.
So I was working as a caseworker for a child welfare organization. So I was working within preventive services, which is when it's organizations that are contracted with the Administration for Children's Services. And the intention of your work is to prevent the children from being removed from the home. So many times the families were referred because maybe there was some type of abuse at some point. Maybe a child was removed and is now back home. Maybe the school called in a case because there were multiple challenges and they felt like the families needed resources. So there were always multiple reasons why families were referred. I remember the point when I became a supervisor. And I thought I was the shiznick, okay? I got a bump in my salary. I was single, living my best life, right? Going to Jimmy's Bronx Cafe for happy hour.
Yeah.
And so I remember the day when ACS came to the agency and told us about this list of restrictions that we were going to have to impose on the families, that we were going to have to start checking the cupboards, going into the, you know, and I felt like it was a violation of people's like personal rights.
Yes.
And I'm like, if I ask them if they have food, I mean, and they tell me yes, why am I looking in their cupboards? Why am I looking in their refrigerator? And at the time I was single, living by myself. I was like, you don't want to look at my refrigerator, you know? So I remember just feeling like, this isn't it. This isn't it. Like, you know, not only was it not it, like I had to now impose these policies on my supervisees, right?
Yes.
And so I felt like it wasn't vibing with me, but now I had to tell my supervisees, like there were all these other things that I'm not even going to mention that they were going to have to start doing, and the way that they were going to have to start documenting, because there was a certain way that funding was supposed to be coming through or whatever.
Oh, I know those funders.
Yes, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, this is not it. And I would say, like, you know, at that time, I was already sort of on a spiritual journey. But I remember at that time, I started to do a little more of like reflection work. Like, and I've always been, you know, very young, thinking about, you know, if I'm doing something, I have to make sure that I really love what I'm doing.
That's right.
Right. And I remember at that point, my sister is also a social worker, one of my sisters, and she was a school social worker. So she had been telling me that there was an opening at the school. She was like, Cindy, there's an opening. Twice she came to me. And at the time, it was so hard to be a New York City Department of Education school social worker. And both times I said, no, I just got the supervisory position. I like what I'm doing. I'm working with families, right? But when it got to the point where the policies in the organization were not matched with my personal values, I knew that it was time for me to go. Yes, it was a comfortable position. Yes, my salary was very good for someone who was 25 at the time, right? And I also knew in my spirit that I wasn't doing myself a service. If I had stayed in, I wouldn't be doing the clients a service, right? And so some of y'all listening right now are in jobs that you have no business being in, right? But you're comfortable. You don't want to take the plunge. You don't want to take the challenge, right? And so I took the challenge, took a $30,000 pay cut, Antonio.
Whoa.
Left that company, went into the Board of Ed as a school social worker 1 month after 9/11.
Wow.
So it was crazy. The day of 9/11, I resigned from this company.
Wow.
And so that was when there was a disconnect. And so it took me, you know, connecting with mentors. I spoke with mentors about my decision making. I connected, more importantly, with myself and what I needed. I decided that the risk was worth it. And eventually the pay followed. Eventually the union worked something out. A year later, I ended up making the same that I was making as, you know, supervisor at that agency.
Yeah. So, you know, so what supported you with actually making the choice to sort of get away from that was intrinsic, right? And so there had to be, you had to pull from something within you to allow yourself to make that decision despite the pay cut and not knowing what was going to come next. You didn't know you were going to get the same rate in a few months later or so on and so forth, right? So is that intrinsic part that I was hoping that you can sort of expand on? Because I know, especially for Black and brown folk, we really question our value and worth as human beings. And so a lot of times we settle for shit that really doesn't honor who we are. And we go back to it. It's just like, when I think about specific work environments, it's like having a toxic relationship with a boo that you're not supposed to be with. You know what I'm saying? But you did because there's an economic something right there holding you in that position. And so can you sort of expand on that? What was that intrinsic something that you had to tap into?
Yes. I mean, I will say that at the time I had started therapy. So I'm going to acknowledge that I knew that at the time there was some childhood stuff that I had been sort of, you know, negotiating, right? That kept coming up for me because the work with the families was triggering in so many ways. So I had to connect with that healing work, right? And then I started reading like self-help books and doing affirmation work.
Right? I know self-help books, yeah.
I started affirmation work. I started connecting with people that were doing their thing, women of color that were challenging themselves. You know, I'm very blessed to have siblings that I could also call my friends. And I have, you know, this one sister that she's like everybody's life coach in the family. And she's actually a life coach for real now. Like she was a life coach before she was a life coach. You know what I'm saying?
Right. That's her calling.
Big up to Dr. Sofia Petus. And so, you know, it was a lot of self-talk, Antonio. And sometimes we don't talk about that work, right? Like the sitting in your room by yourself and thinking like, the hell am I doing there?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like the questions, asking yourself questions.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then waiting for the answer.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
And then connecting with like-minded people. And I say that intentionally because sometimes we connect with people about our issues that we have no reason to, right? Because they're going to be like, no, F that. You better stay at that job. You're going to mess up your pension. That's what people are telling me. Oh, you're going to leave the DOE job. You're going to mess up your pension. I'm so glad I followed the journey that I followed. And at some point, I feel like I want to write about that because I've taken so many different roads that people think that I always knew what I wanted to do. And I still feel like, to be honest, like I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. You know,
there's still so many different sort of adventures you want to go on.
Yes.
Yeah. But it sounds like one of the things that sort of pulled you into the direction you went into was you had a certain level of trust in yourself that could not be moved. Absolutely. Right? It couldn't be questioned. Like there was a certain level of trust that sort of allowed you to make choices that you probably otherwise wouldn't have made if you didn't trust yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I heard in your answer just now, like that trust. So even though there's people
good
around
therapist, Antonio.
Well, you know, you know, some people say that. But yeah. I wasn't expecting that.
For real, for real.
Thank you. I mean, but that's real because I think, you know, I think for myself, right, you know, I've made so many, I mean, if people knew me 10 years ago, I was in a completely different place, right? And completely different. And I'm talking about professionally speaking, but obviously it comes with the healing work that I had to do, right? The introspection. And so, but the trust in myself has never sort of led me astray, right? I always, there was a certain sort of inkling that I got, like my spidey senses will tell me exactly where I was supposed to go. And you know, the universe never lies, right? The universe never lies. It sort of pulls you forward like a magnet. It's about yourself being able to trust yourself enough to follow that pull, right? And that's one thing that I never question is if my body tells me that I'm supposed to move in a certain direction, even if it's scary, right? Even if I don't know what's going to happen next, I honor that. I allow myself to be pulled because I know the universe ain't trying to fuck me up, right? I mean, the universe wants the best for me, right? And so, that trust really has pulled me forward in a lot of ways. I mean, I just quit my job, you know, at Rutgers University because of challenges that I was having there, right? And that was scary as fuck. Like, I'm talking about, like, I got mortgage and stuff to pay. Like, I got 3 dogs to take care of. Like, you know, that's, I mean, beautiful benefits and so on and so forth. It was a pretty easy job. I mean, I loved the position, but it was not the right environment for me. And so I trusted myself enough to step into private practice, right? And even though I'm just starting, like it's a baby, it's like a little seed, right? It's like, poof, right? I don't question myself. I don't question, you know, the vibrations in my body because I always end up exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so that's what I'm hearing in your story. I just wanted to like, resonate with it. And I think it's important for other people to hear that too, because, you know, we're not often taught that we are the authority of our lives, right? And that's a damn shame. Because if we knew, right, that we are the authority of our lives, a lot of us would not be tolerating a lot of the shit that we tolerate. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So, see, we can like, this is beautiful. So let me like refocus. No, because this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what we need, right? We need, man. Anyway. Okay. So I feel like I've been thrown. It's like when Will Smith smacked Chris Rock in the face. That's how I feel right now. Like I'm like stuck. Right? You know the spirit? Like I'm feeling that spirit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm picking up all that you're throwing down. All of it.
It's sort of, it stunned me. I'm stunned. And I think that's, we don't often, I feel like we don't often, in my experience, I don't often have conversations like this on the regular, right? Because so many people, because I'm the therapist guy. I'm the one, you know, doing the light work, right? I'm the one sort of turning on the lights and reinvigorating people's spirits and reigniting their fires. And so I don't, and even with other colleagues, they're all tired.
But then I want to flip it on you then for a
go,
hot
go, flip it.
On a hot minute, if you will, right? So we get to create those spaces for ourselves, right? Because I have conversations like this on a regular basis.
Really?
That's what keeps me in touch with that antenna, inner wisdom, inner knowing, inner spirit. I love that you said the spidey sense, right? Because you get to curate those spaces for yourself, because then it'll connect you to lift you even higher than you already at right now. Because together we're better, right? That's why birds fly in formation, right? Because together they go farther. I'm encouraging you and challenging you to develop those communities for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what that's what Freedom Fighters of the Minds is, right? Which is the initiative that I talked about in the introduction. Is creating a community of like-minded individuals, which is what prompted these, you know, these lives. And so it's me, you know, sort of generating that, and I'm on my way. But yes, very good point. I think we have to surround ourselves with people that feed our spirit, right? Because that's the only way I feel like that not only does that nurture us, right, but it supports us in our evolution, even if we don't know that that's happening. Like even this conversation gave me so much, and we're not even done. But like it fed me in such a way that, you feel me? Like, because I'm like, anyway. So so now that and people in the chat are like, they feeling this conversation. I'm just letting you know.
I can't, and you know what? Spirit did that because I get so distracted with the chats when I do lives. So I can't see what y'all writing, but I love all the love. I'm receiving it. Thank you.
And you know what's so funny? My first live that I did, like my guest Melinda, she was like, she was engaging with the chat, right? And I'm like, I gotta pull you back, right? Yeah. Because obviously we have these questions, but I think it's important to engage with the people that are in the chat. But it is also, because the time constraints, is almost impossible to get through it all. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. So I'm glad that you said what you just said, just because the universe did that. Okay, so when you're thinking about white supremacy in the mental health field, can you sort of give us an example of how you have addressed, if you have addressed, white supremacy in the mental health field, and what was the feedback that you received in addressing white supremacy in the mental health field?
Just recently, so I supervise clinicians in a mental health clinic, and so it's an amazing practice. Clinician that I'm supervising, and
Espérate, can you say that again, because you started spinning.
Sorry, there's a white.
I think
clinic, so I have.
It must be the Karens. Karen, stay away.
Now I have a mix of clinicians that I work with, and I was working with a white clinician about the ways in which she was working with her client, and she had been with the practice for a long time. I was just sort of taking over the supervision. And in the time that she had been a practitioner, you know, one of the things that I like to support clinicians on, particularly clinicians that are working with populations that are different from them, is the acknowledgement of that, right? Acknowledgement of the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma, and all of that, because we got to name it in the room so that clients could get comfortable getting into the real deal of what's going on, right? And so that is a way that I break that white supremacy, because in all the years that she had been with this practice, no one had ever, and these were owners that are folks of color, right? That had never sort of set the framework that this is going to be part of our practice, that we sort of address. You know, recently I was completing an intake so that I could engage in my continued therapeutic work, right? Because I think that's important. And one of the questions is asked was the history of my interaction with racist practices, with racial battle fatigue. I was so impressed with that organization, right?
That's dope.
So that was one way that right away, and then I voiced a concern around that, right, in general to the practice. Like, you know, how are we sort of catching those elements with our clients? And you know, so it's not my practice, right? So they'll choose to do whatever they want to do. But in terms of my role in the practice, I could sort of bring that into the element of supervision.
Right. And it's those little things, right, that make such a difference that we often times don't think make a difference. But it's those little things, the little things.
Absolutely.
You know, some people...
it changed the dynamic of the client intervention like this.
Yes. How come you think? Can you sort of tell us how come it changed?
Well, because the client felt seen, right? Like this particular practitioner talked about a 45-year-old client. Could you imagine receiving therapy for 2 years with this climate, in this pandemic, with the George Floyd situation? That I mean, we don't even have the time to go through everything, right?
Yes.
Right, everything. And so that we're in therapy talking about my relationship with my mother, but you're not going to ask me, like, how I'm moving in the world as a Black man?
Right. Yes. And that just all it takes is that one question, right? Like, how are you moving through the world? How are you sort of experiencing the world as a Black man? Just that one question. Because oftentimes race is sort of ignored, right? When we're thinking about like therapy, like you might check it off in the intake, right? But it's not like I had a conversation with a client, a Black woman, and we was talking about her standards of beauty that was sort of she had internalized about herself that she wasn't beautiful enough because of her hair texture. And she didn't understand the linkage between that and anti-Blackness and white supremacy. Wow. Right? And so I was able to sort of get her to see that for the first time. But it's those little things, right? Because she didn't even realize that she was talking about not feeling beautiful enough. She didn't even realize that it was connected to her Blackness. Wow, she didn't even realize the sort of historical significance of that conversation. Right. And so all those little steps, right, that we sort of take as clinicians or supervisors make a huge difference, because that's what our people need, is to be seen in the way you just described. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, let me go time check, because I feel like, get what I am over there, because I can't see.
7:58.
Oh, damn. See? Woo. Okay. So I feel like, so the final question is, and I feel like you answered it already. Can you, when you think about white supremacy in the mental health field, and I know we just talked about that particular example, can you sort of tell us of any sort of, what could be a solution to sort of dealing with that larger conversation? I mean, besides what you just mentioned, like, what could be like, what's the secret, like, in your opinion, what could be the secret antidote?
I mean, this might be controversial, right? And that
we love controversy.
And not even, but you know, what's interesting is that spring of 2021, in sort of, we were still in the height of the pandemic. NASW decided to add something special to the Code of Ethics. Okay. Which was self-care. Okay. Right? Which it's controversial because, first of all, how can we be caring for others without caring for themselves? And that's what so many people have been doing. That's why me and my business partner are so damn busy, right? Because people are just so burnt out, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, burnout, whatever you name it. Yep. But it's just like intentional self-care, individual self-care, community care, checking in on ourselves. Like, these kinds of conversations, Antonio, are transcendent, right? Because someone is going to listen to this and say, damn, That's exactly what I've been thinking, yo. I'm going to that meeting tomorrow. I'm telling my supervisor, right? And so, and there's the organizational care. Like some of y'all out here are supervisors, directors, right? And we're working our workers to the bone. You know, are we really checking in and challenging our supervisors on the care that we need to provide that optimal work, right? There are people that reach out to the Velocity Visions and they're like, we need you to do like a 30-minute workshop on self-care, just so they could check the box that we did the work, right? First of all, we don't do 30-minute presentations. So you can go to somebody else for that.
That's like, hello. Yeah.
No, you can go to somebody else for that. You'll find somebody to do it. I'm not going to do that, right? Because then I'm not in integrity with myself.
That's right.
Right? So it's engaging in that self-excavation work, that self-development work, whatever that looks like. Healing circles, therapy, prayers, meditation, yoga. Lo que tú necesitas.
That's
what
right.
you need, you get it for yourselves. Because when you're authentic to you and operating in your optimal self, you could be in a better space to do that social justice work, right? There's too many social justice folks that are burnt out. They've been martyrs, right? Oh, I'm going to be out there for 24 hours, right? I'm going to be on the march for 24 hours. You didn't eat. You didn't call your mother. Your kids haven't seen you in 3 weeks. You don't even know what's going on in their school, right? Like, don't get me started on that. But I feel like it needs to start with us, because many of us have not been engaging in the white supremacist social justice work in the way that we should, because we've not healed, and we're not even touching on the healing. Not to say that you got to be fully healed to do the work, but we got to get to the work of ourselves. So that when we're doing that work, we are doing that work.
That's right.
So that's what I would say. And that's what I continue to say. I tell my students that they so sick of me. They so sick of me. And that's okay.
No, but you know what's so, look, I know it's 8:03 because I just looked at the time, but I really want to ask you one final question, because you're such a, you're such a treasure. There's something about you that's like a treasure. That you have these sort of this wisdom, these diamonds, right? These jewels to sort of leave us with. So, because and if you can just give me 5 more minutes, I just really, because it goes back to the first point that you made earlier, right? When you talk about, like, you know, because you just brought up like social justice and this sort of idea of social work and social justice, but we don't really learn that. We don't really learn how to be advocates, like you mentioned earlier. And so the idea of sort of going in and being an advocate or a social justice warrior is really scary for a lot of folks, right? I've been, you know, in my last job, like the one I just left, I was the team lead of the Justice and Equity team. Right, which was our diversity committee, but we evolved into the Justice and Equity team because we was not playing no more games. And I really was the voice, right? And I had obviously my colleagues with me, but I was the main voice, and I was like, I mean, the darts were coming at me, right? I mean, I was the target. And I've seen a lot of my colleagues, other social workers, sort of crawl under a rock in defeat. And so we know that there is backlash that happens when you're sort of speaking up and speaking out, right? As social justice warriors, as social workers in the field. So it's very scary to have people speak up. And most people don't, because they don't want to lose their job or they don't want to get the negative backlash, right? And so if you can just leave us with one more sort of diamond, for those people who are sort of apprehensive about doing the social justice work, even though that's part of our code of ethics, right?
Okay.
What would you say? Well, in theory, you know, on paper it looks good, but in practice, it doesn't really happen the way that we wish probably that, you know, that it could. What would you say to the people who are apprehensive about sort of stepping into that sort of advocacy role?
That's a great question. You know what's interesting? I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember the name exactly, but it was talking about leadership, right? And I want to leave y'all with this. Like, everyone here is a leader, right? There are leaders that are sort of innate leaders and that they become supervisors and directors and executive directors, right? And then there's those leaders, people that you meet that bring in the light, that influencers, persuaders, right? So it's like, you don't have to wait to be in a position to take action, right? And action looks differently for different people. So when I teach a class called Social Justice, funny enough, promoting social justice. And at first, everyone in the class was like, I'm not going to no march. I'm not writing letters. That's not me, right? And I'm like, and you don't have to do any of that. I'm an empath. I can't go to marches. It's too much for me. Too much energy. Those abuya, all those people, you know, unhealed and all their stuff.
Yes.
I can't do that, right?
Yes,
but you know what I could do? I could do an IG live with my brother Antonio.
Right?
I could talk to my students in my classroom. I could write chapters, right? I could connect in healing circles. So y'all figure out what role you could play with the gifts, talents, and abilities that were given to you. And that's where I think we fall short, is that there's this image of what a social justice warrior is, and that we feel we got to check one of those boxes so that we feel like we're not doing anything. And the thing that we might be doing is educating our children at home. Let's start with the home front, okay?
Yeah. Yes.
So that's what I leave folks with, right? Like, you have all you need, and also connect with community, right? Take care of yourself, your community, and if you're in a space to create influence in your organizations, let's do that community organizational care as well.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your energy, for your love, for your vibrations. I mean, really, I mean, you are something. I mean, you really are something. And I got the most, utmost appreciation for the fact that you even exist on this planet. So thank you. Yeah, really, real talk, man. I'm serious. I ain't playing. Listen, if you know something about me, I don't do brown nose and shit. You know what I'm saying? So when I feel like there's somebody worth celebrating, I'm going to give you your flowers right now.
Thank you.
You feel me? So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate everything that you spit today. I feel like I'm going to invite you to other things, if you don't mind, like maybe other lives. I definitely am going to do a podcast, and I'll talk about that in the future. But I feel like there's so much. I mean, you're a resource. And so I appreciate you. And these are the kind of partners we need in this work, people like yourself. And so thank you all who are listening today, who came in and were engaging in the chat, even though Dr. Cindy couldn't see it. I saw it, but she needed to be focused. And so if you're interested in if you're interested in finding out more about the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, you can go to www.theliberatedself.org. And if you're interested in Freedom Fighters of the Mind Initiative, which is for Black and Brown therapists and mental health professionals, please email me at antonio@theliberatedself.org. And we will see you at the replays, whoever is going to see this at the replays. And this will be uploaded on YouTube tonight. And then tomorrow you'll find out all about the links, how to find all these videos on YouTube, because our IG lives keep being deleted by Instagram. And so, which are because of Karen's. So, Dr. Cindy, thank you so much. Have a great night. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of what you bring. And I'm going to shut this thing off. So I'm going to figure a way, because I always have to figure out how to shut it off. I just never know how to do it.
Well, good night and thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll speak to you soon, okay?
Excellent. Thank
Now
you.
let me see if I can do this right. How do I do this? I always do this. See you soon. Peace.